Welcome back to What's Going On with Earl Ingram. As always, I want to thank the ACLU for sponsoring this program. And as always, we really are excited about the subject matter that we're going to be discussing today. We are joined, and the discussion will certainly be centered around Milwaukee Public Schools and what is happening with the budget. I think it's really a critical time for those of us who live in the city of Milwaukee. I have to clearly state that I'm a graduate of Milwaukee Public Schools. Granted, there were still Milwaukee Public Schools back in 1972 when I graduated, and contrary to popular belief, there was electricity and not candlelight. But I'm also one of 12 siblings who graduated from Milwaukee Public Schools. I have a mother who retired from Milwaukee Public Schools, countless nieces and nephews. So it's safe to say I'm a volunteer at Milwaukee Public Schools and have been for 12 years or more. And so I think, and I'm a property owner in the city of Milwaukee, which means I have a stake in what is going on in Milwaukee Public Schools, as many do. And with that backdrop, I'd like to introduce the guest for today's show, Miss Kristen Payne. She is with MPS Parents for a Fair Budget. Also, Miss Nora Jensen. She also is with MPS Parents for a Fair Budget. And Miss Ingrid Henry, who is the president of the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. And so with that backdrop, I want to first say hello to everybody and thank you for accepting the invitation.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having us.
You know, go ahead. For those who are listening from around the state and all other places, I think it's important to know a little background about Milwaukee Public Schools. Milwaukee Public Schools is the largest school district in the entire state of Wisconsin. Probably has anywhere, depending on who you're talking to, anywhere between 58,000 and 60,000 students. Certainly a far cry from when I was in Milwaukee Public Schools when there was 120,000 students. There clearly have been some changes as it relates to students who are in Milwaukee Public Schools, because clearly back in my day, you know, parents had a lot of kids, and, you know, as my parents had 13. And so, you know, Milwaukee Public Schools was built to be able to have and educate 120,000 students. Certainly that was a long time ago. Today, that's not the case. It's anywhere between, I don't know, again, 58, 60,000 students. But I think it's important that people know that. And let's begin this conversation. Ms. Payne, you want to take it off?
Actually, I'm going to kick it over to Ingrid first to set the context for us a little bit with the budget situation.
All right. Ms. Henry?
So last week, MTEA put out a press conference, and honestly, it was a distress signal to all 9 board directors in the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and it's to call for an intervention to bring stability to the students and the families and the school communities that the directors are responsible for. So the reason we did that last week is that MPS sent out art, music, physical education, counselors, paraprofessionals, children's health assistants. They sent them letters that cut their hours in schools or even cut them completely out of their school budget. And our concern is this: the voters in Milwaukee passed that $87 million referendum in 2021 to ensure our students have access to art, music, physical education, counselors as a permanent fixture of the budget, not something that can be cut out at the whim of the superintendent. And so the MPS board and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency cannot allow the superintendent to abandon the will of the voters. And to even go back a little bit further, in January of this year, MTEA members warned the administration, the school board, and the public. And this was about, actually, it was over 350 public education workers that filled the boardroom and the excess room. And they packed it to demand a fair budgeting process that incorporated meaningful input from school communities, and it prioritizes stable staffing for our students. And that continued into early March. And at that time, the MTEA and the ASC, which is the union for the MPS principals and administrators, put out a joint letter sounding the alarm again about the confusion, the chaos that is happening during this budget process. At that night, the board heard from a number of principals and other MPS staff about the lack of transparency, about the fact that they still could not tell staff if they were cut, if they were staying in their school community. So that night, the board heard from frontline workers in buildings about how they were fearful about what was happening.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in and talk a little bit about what this was like from a parent's perspective. I sit on what's called the Student Engagement Council for my school. And the School Engagement Council is supposed to be an advisory committee. It's written into MPS administrative code that we are supposed to be able to have substantive input into the budget. And unfortunately, because of all of the chaos, so this chaos, I think, started when the administration said, hey, we've got this deficit, and then started trying to make, I think, the numbers work without, like Ingrid is saying, without transparency, without discussion of important stakeholders. So when we met with our SEC, we're essentially told what was going to happen to our school. And there was absolutely no room for any substantive input. And in fact, this meeting was held the very last day it possibly could have been because of all the chaos leading up to this date. And so as the SEC representative for my school, I abstained from signing the budget form, which is one of my responsibilities, because the process was just so screwed up. And I know that Nora could talk a little bit about how the budget cuts are impacting our school more on the details basis.
So before we get so far down the line, I have to say that, again, as a lifelong resident of the city of Milwaukee, 71 years and counting, the budget, $50 million budget deficit, is something that supposedly was supposed to have been addressed with the $83 million referendum, million dollar referendum that was presented to taxpayers 2 years ago. And so the taxpayers said yes, and we gave these additional dollars to address the shortages that Milwaukee Public Schools was talking about. It certainly was under a different superintendent at that time, and yet here we are with an additional $50 million budget deficit that has to be addressed. There's a new superintendent who's there now, and I would like to ask, what's supposed to happen? How is a $50 million budget deficit supposed to be addressed, short of taxpayers paying additional dollars towards a budget that's already $1.5 billion dollars, and which is equivalent to the entire Milwaukee County budget, which is $1.4 billion. How is that supposed to be addressed?
So Earl, I'm going to jump in here to set even more context for the listeners. The state of Wisconsin has underfunded public education for about 2 decades at this point. So the money that has been stolen from our students is in the budget surplus, which is, I believe, around $4 billion, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
That money belongs to students across the state, and Wisconsin is holding that hostage. That being said, that referendum was run to ensure that, because the state was not fully funding public education, that students did have opportunities like art, music, and Phi-Ed. And what is happening across the state now is a travesty that legislature still has not addressed, because just this year alone, 73 districts are going to referendum again. What has happened in Milwaukee is not unique to Milwaukee. It is a problem that is not being addressed. As to what is actually going on right now, we don't have answers as a public as to why there is still this shortfall. But when we look at it in comparison to exactly what you said, MPS has a $1.6 billion budget. This is a small amount, and no matter what, you cannot take out this action on the back of our students. Our students have been deprived long enough, and that there need to be things like, you got to look at the contracts in this district, and you need to start there. You don't start with cuts to students and classrooms.
So let me interject this. There's 149 buildings that Milwaukee Public Schools basically has jurisdiction over. And as I stated at the beginning, there were 120,000 students in those buildings. The district was built to accommodate baby boomers. And 120,000 students in Milwaukee Public Schools is probably half of that now. So my question, and many other taxpayers' questions, are, how is it possible that we're still maintaining that many buildings with half the students, and the cost that's associated with with maintaining those buildings when you only have half the student population? That's where it has to be addressed.
That's a great question, Earl. I mean, I think, and one that should be brought to the board and to the administration.
The board is aware of this. This is not new. This has been talked about for a long time. People just had not moved on it.
Well, I think part of my understanding about the problem was where those cuts were proposed, which was in communities that have historically been disinvested in. And so I think the conversation needs to happen. Yet at the same time, our new superintendent has added top-level administrators who are making lots and lots of money, but the cuts are coming in the classroom. Despite what she's saying, we're having classroom positions cut and students serving, high-touch student serving people being cut from our schools. So sure, we can talk about the buildings, but that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening on the ground.
No, I guess what I'm saying is, this is a new superintendent. She just got here. The school board selected her. I was at those meetings. There were two other superintendent candidates, two men who clearly had a lot of experience, and they were rejected. And so overwhelmingly, the board wanted this superintendent that we have now. And so a decision was made by the people who are in charge of Milwaukee Public Schools. It's a year later, and now, people aren't happy with the decision that was made by those who are in charge of making decisions that impact a $1.6 billion budget and all of the students that are there. So where do we go from here? Because if part of the reason that from conversations I've had that she was brought here was to make changes because of what transpired prior to her getting here. The budget deficits that, MPS has been dealing with. So I don't know, she clearly has made a decision that was championed by the school board. She couldn't have moved forward with her plan without the school board giving her the blessings. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think that one thing that I'd like to point out is that in our review of some of these contracts that have been put through, we see a possible conflict of interest with the superintendent. So she has prioritized contracts with a company called Formative, which is headed by her previous chief of staff. And that is the company that's helping her strategize on where to make these cuts. And so we wonder if the superintendent can really be clear-eyed about this. And I think, Earl, to talk about this as actually more of the same, right? Like, I think what's happening with this administration is more of the same, where we don't have transparency. There is confusion about where this money is being spent and how it's being spent, and we don't have the input. So I would say that isn't much different in some ways than what had happened in the past.
And one thing, just to piggyback on that, when you mentioned Formative, that was again, that's her former chief of staff's company that owns that, and there was no like open bid for that contract. That's a $250,000 contract that was given to them, and there was like no competitive bidding. And it's not a local company; it's a company from Minnesota.
So let me ask you guys, because again, there's a school board whose charge it is to make decisions that impact and affect all of us. And so they've been duly elected to make these decisions. Have you gone to the school board and asked them why they thought that these things were okay? Because after all, they're the ones who are responsible for this.
I'm definitely going to let Kristen and Nora jump in, but I want to say this first. We have elected officials all over the place, and as constituents, we don't necessarily agree with the direction that they're going, and that is why right now you have the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, the Association of Supervisors. You have MPS Parents for a Fair Budget, along with different parent groups calling on the school board directors and saying, hey, there is something wrong, and we're telling you what it is, and we're expecting a response that corrects course and doesn't hurt our school communities.
And yes, we are in contact with the board. I've requested meetings with my representatives, and we're also asking the board to hold a special meeting as soon as possible so that we can have more discussion about this. The speed at which this has been pushed through and the chaos that has ensued, it is going to destabilize MPS at a time when we can't afford that. And it will destabilize in terms of the classroom and the school functioning, and that's intolerable.
I will tell you guys that for a long, long time, there have been talks and conversations about whether or not the school board is capable of dealing with a budget of the size of what Milwaukee Public Schools budget is. And clearly, when we're talking about, seven people who basically get paid a pauper's wage to oversee a budget of that magnitude is nonsensical. It always has been. And part of the reason I believe that we're going through this is because when you are going to put, and I don't mean this as an attack on anybody. This has been this way for a long time. To give a budget of $1.6 billion to 7 school board members who have full-time jobs and who don't have the time enough to go through line items on what's in a budget and expect them to be able to handle all these things is nonsensical. If you look at the county board and what the way they're dealing with the budget, not only are there 16 county board members, but they also have staff, each one of them. So the system that we're talking about is archaic. And at some point in time, that's got to be addressed, because it's part of the reason why, in my opinion, that we are where we are now. I know people don't want change, but look at where we are. And so all of these different things that we're talking about, the impact of what's going to happen with students. You know, I volunteer at a school right now. The school was built to house 1,100 students. There's 125 students in the building. Okay? And all the staff that goes along with maintaining that structure to keep that building afloat does not make any sense whatsoever. When we're talking about budget deficits and budget shortages, these are the kinds of tough decisions that are going to have to be made. If I told you how many other schools that I've gone to and volunteered in where they have the capacity to have 2,000 students, and on a daily basis, there's 350 to 400. These are real hard issues that impact and affect the bottom line with what we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it's important to be having these conversations in a transparent way that builds trust and relationships with the community. Right now, that's just not happening. I think the chaos that is going on in terms of the budget right now is only going to lead to more distrust. And
well, I think there clearly is. This is a difficult time. Is there going to be fallout from the decisions that are being made right now? Is it going to create chaos inside of Milwaukee Public Schools? Absolutely. To remove APs in places that don't need less but need more. As I stated, I'm in schools volunteering, and I have been for 12 years. So I know what I'm talking about from the perspective of being in some of the more difficult schools, especially high schools. It's not, students aren't the students that they were when I was in school. We came from stable families, and it was a different time. We're dealing with children and families that are fractured, and they need more support, not less. So to expect a principal to be able to deal with anything over 380 students, I guess, gets an AP. Well, depending on what school you're in, you may need 2 APs for 380 students, depending on which one it is. So I understand the impact of the decisions that are being talked about and the impact of what that's going to mean throughout the district. Again, I'm asking, this is going to take a yeoman's effort, and it's not just cutting. I'm in agreement with you, not just cutting, but there's got to be some other answers, and I'm wondering what they are.
Earl, one of the things you're bringing up is closing of schools, right? And I just want to put out there that there are multiple studies that show that closing schools do not save money. In fact, Superintendent Caselius even mentioned that. What I know is where those schools are, and knowing that what you would be doing is another level of disinvestment in Black neighborhoods. And I just think about, I'm going to go with the example of Our Avenue. COA, which is right behind it, which was a huge partner in the Our Avenue school community. They did before and after school care. They were a community center, et cetera, over there on Burleigh. They closed. And there is a vacuum. And now when you're talking about the possibility of closing our school, that's just another blow to the Imani community. And so I can't accept that we're going to continue to abandon neighborhoods. What people want, parents want, is to have a strong school. They want the supports that you are talking about. They want opportunities for their children, and they shouldn't have to like go far outside of their neighborhood to get those. And so as we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about this budget, and we're looking at, and so you have Kristen, you have Nora, you have other people who are looking at, there are contracts going out the door right now that are totaling millions of dollars. And people are not closely examining those. And are they student facing positions, jobs, or contracts? But it's hard to tell if there's no transparency. But what we do know is this: when you have a children's health assistant and the school day is, depending on the school, 6 to close to 8 hours. And we know that a children's health assistant is responsible for toileting of children. They're responsible for feeding of children and taking care of medically frail children. And when you cut their hours, who is supporting that student during that time? And that's what we're here talking about today, that these cuts are detrimental to the students that go to Milwaukee Public Schools every single day.
So let me, a couple things. I live in a Black community. I live right up the street from a school that clearly I don't want to see leave my neighborhood. I understand that, okay? And it's a part of our community. It certainly provides life to our community. But at the bottom line with not wanting to see buildings shut down is financially not being able to support all of those things. So decisions have to be made. And so if the decisions that have to be made either are going to impact and affect individuals or buildings, is going to have to be one or the other. I'm a treatment foster parent. Nobody understands any more than I do. My wife and I took in a disabled child at the age of 2, and for 21 years, until he was 21, he was in Milwaukee Public Schools with a one-on-one. I understand the impact of what we're talking about here, because no other district would have done for him what Milwaukee Public Schools did for him. I'm not unmindful of that. What I am saying is that, again, if there's a building with 125 students and the capacity is 1,100, then it can't be both ways, because the cost of keeping the building up is going to be either we're going to have to get rid of people or the building. I think it's best that we side with making sure that the people who are needed are there for the students as opposed to the buildings. It can't be both.
I think we need to bring into the conversation the idea of equity, though, and what Ingrid has said about the disinvestment in some of these Black neighborhoods. And so looking across the district, if we are going to talk about schools that are going to be closed, it just can't be. It can't be in these neighborhoods where there is this history of long-term disinvestment. But that isn't what's happening, Earl. There isn't conversation ongoing about the buildings. The conversation right now is about the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the assistant principals, all of these people who are getting cut. It's happening now. And we're asking for the board to put the brakes on, for us to have a conversation with transparency and to involve the appropriate stakeholders. That's the reasonable position.
Let me ask you guys, what if the board says no? Because just devil's advocate, because the board is in a position to say no. The board is in a position, again, to make the final decision on what happens here. And so is there, you guys are having these conversations with the board members, and the board members apparently aren't acquiescing to what it is you guys are saying or asking. Are you organizing more members of the community to bring the necessary pressure on board members? Because short of that, I don't know how it's going to be. You can make it happen.
I would encourage anyone who's listening, who's concerned about this issue, to reach out to their board member, whoever represents them. And we are definitely encouraging other parents in our community and in our organization to do the same. There's power in numbers, and the more of us that let our voices be heard, the more likely it is to have an impact.
Well, see, I understand the magnitude of it. It's why I'm working right now with Civic Media to bring together a community meeting in the next 2 weeks to have this discussion. It's a critical discussion. And I don't know if people are whose lives are going to be turned inside out and upside down are even aware of what is transpiring here. And it's one of the main reasons, Kristen, why I reached out to you, because, again, I live in a community where there are many people whose children go to Milwaukee Public Schools and they're not informed. And also because of the time that I spend inside of schools working with young people whose parents aren't concerned, because they don't know. They're struggling to survive.
Yes.
And so it's critically important that before these decisions are made, that parents know exactly what's getting ready to happen. And that's the whole reason and rationale behind me bringing you guys on today, in addition to working with Civic Media to create a community gathering to have this discussion.
Yes,
on a broader scale.
Totally agree with you. And that's why we're organizing. We have a petition going right now. And people can connect with us either on Instagram or Facebook, or email us at MPS Parents, the number 4, afairbudget@proton.me. And we are planning to put pressure and continue to reach out to our board members to demand slowing down or stop to this process so that it can be further examined.
So I'm going to take at this moment a short break to hear from our sponsor, American Civil Liberties Union. All right. Welcome back to What's Going On with Earl Ingram. Again, I want to say thanks to Kristen Payne, Nora, Jensen, both from Milwaukee Public Schools, Parent for a Fair Budget, and to Miss Ingrid Henry, President of the MTEA. So I'm not an enemy of the district or anybody who's associated with it. I live in Milwaukee. I'm born there. I'm going to die there. And so I am concerned with what's in the future of these young people and the community that I love. And so, yes, I clearly am engaged and aware of things that impact families and children, and MPS is certainly one of those entities that if we don't figure it out, the future of young people and especially young children of color, in many instances, who struggle on a daily basis, we got to fix that. Now, the other side of this is many people don't understand. They see Milwaukee Public Schools as if it's all negative. They don't know about the great schools that exist, the Montessori schools. They don't know about the School of Languages. They don't know about Golda Meirs. They don't know about the Rufus Kings. They don't know about kids who are succeeding and doing great things with their lives. And so that's not talked about a lot. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I love Milwaukee Public Schools, and I just wanted to point out, I actually live in Cudahy, and I use the school choice option, the open enrollment option, to enroll my kids in Milwaukee Public School because I'd rather have them there than in the Cudahy school. I've got one child at a Montessori school, and I've got one child at Golda Meir, and I couldn't be happier with that decision. And I'm a person, I'm not a resident of the city. I live in Cudahy, but I love Milwaukee Public Schools, and I'm really happy my kids are there. And that's why I'm so passionate about this.
So I just think it's really important. And then as I kind of read some of what is in the mind of Dr. Casilius, she wants to change the way the district is structured. Apparently, she wants to change the model. She wants to move to pre-K to sixth grade and seventh grade. In other words, junior high model 7 through 12, pre-K to 6 and 7th through 12. And in doing so, that will certainly condense the buildings, because if you're now going to move kids in 2 tracks as opposed to the different tracks that we have now, what are the thoughts about that? Is that also an issue that people aren't happy with?
So, Earl, this goes back to the issue of transparency. It's really very simple to find out what parents, families are thinking and whether they agree with this. It's the thing that I did with my members. I asked them, the superintendent has this proposal out. What do you guys think about it? What do you see as plus minuses or any other comments or concerns? The superintendent has not taken the step to ask parents. And by the way, I am an MPS parent. She has not asked any parent how they feel about her K through 6, 7 through 12 plan. What I can tell you is there are many educators and parents that I have spoken to who are concerned. The K through 6 portion, maybe not so much. The 7 through 12, they do not feel it's appropriate for 7th, 8th graders to be in a high school setting. But it comes down again to ask the question. You have to ask the families you serve.
So see, just from the conversation that we're having now, I didn't know much at all about, and this is part of the issue, what is actually taking place and what is transpiring with conversations inside of the district, the broader district, than what the average taxpayer or parent whose child is in Milwaukee Public Schools. These conversations are very impactful and very important. But I would ask, from this perspective, the superintendent has been here a little over a year. And it appears as though she's ruffled a lot of feathers. And, we're at a point where it sounds like people aren't very happy with her and would not be crying crocodile tears if she was removed. And I would ask, do you think that you guys can work with her Is it at a point where you feel like she should not be here anymore? And then I would ask the question, then where would MPS go from there? If in fact that we needed a change of the guard again, a year into the new superintendent's tenure, what happens to the district then?
Well, I'm not going to, I think, speculate about what would happen if she were removed, but I want to go back to your original question, which was, can we work with her? And I think that all of us here and all parents across the district are focused on our students and our staff and really making sure our community gets what they need. So if she is able and willing to sit down with us and metabolize what we are trying to tell her, to actually take the information in and do something with it, then absolutely, because our goal would be the same. But that's not what we're seeing here. And so until that happens, I don't know what there is to work with. I'm on, just Earl, for context, I'm on the school engagement committee for my school. I'm on the district advisory council. I do a lot of volunteering to try to get involved with school governance so that I can be part of these conversations. And in none of those groups were we given information ahead of time about this budget. It again comes back down to the process. This is not the way to work with the community that you're new to.
Let me ask you, has it been in prior budgets conversation and input in that, and that the parents were given access and prior to this superintendent coming in, has there been transparency historically?
This budget process was highly irregular. Sitting on my SEC for several years, this has never happened since I've been part of a school community trying to make decisions where we've gotten it so late, and that it was so controlled by central office, and that we were essentially cut out of any substantive feedback.
This clearly is bigger than most people think, what we're talking about here, because clearly when Dr. Casillas came in, I talked with a lot of people who weren't a part of Milwaukee Public Schools, and they were happy to see that there were going to be changes, especially at central office. There are many people who celebrated that. And I know that the relationship that Dr. Casillas has built with the business community and the mayor's office and all of those kinds of things, they kind of championed and loved what she was starting to pursue. So what I'm saying is, I'm not one of those who thinks that because these relationships were built with the business community and the mayor's office, that means the best for our community. So I'm not blinded by that. But what I'm saying is, she does have that support with her, and this is going to be a yeoman's work to try to get this message across. And I just again want to make sure that at least we give you an opportunity to get your message to people in the community who are going to be impacted and affected by what's transpiring. And again, I have to continue to say that, man, the school board is the key. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The school board selected her. The school board supported her in the decisions that she made. She couldn't have done any of these things without the school board. And so I would say that clearly part of this should not just be going after the superintendent. It should be clear to people that the school board, Milwaukee Public School Board, is supporting her in the moves that she is making. That should be clear. And you can't dance around that. That needs to be made clear to everybody so people know I can't attack the superintendent because I can't make anything happen with her, but I certainly can do something with the people we elect and sit over on Beleach Street.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's important. Again, I said it before and I'll say it again. It's important for anyone listening who cares about this issue and thinks this budget is unfair to put pressure on their school board members, reach out to them, ask for a meeting, and just keep putting the pressure on. Those are, elected officials and they serve us.
And so, so the last thing I'll ask, and then I'll just let you guys go ahead and any ideas where we can make up a $50 million budget deficit without cutting staff?
I think we are interested in seeing some of these contracts that have gone through, and again, focusing on consultants and contracts where we're not talking about student serving positions. This balance should not be balanced on the backs of our frontline workers. It's a non-starter.
The superintendent has said several times publicly that no classroom positions are being eliminated, and that's flat out not true. I know because Golda Meir, a third grade teacher, is being eliminated. That's an entire classroom that's being eliminated, and they're eliminating, I think, 5, paraprofessionals, like teaching assistants that are student facing. They're removing the reading interventionist. Those are all classroom positions. So, I mean, where the cuts are being made is being done really across the board, like one size fits all. They're not taking into account the individual needs of the schools. I think that each individual school needs to have more, obviously there's going to have to be cuts because of the budget deficit, but I think that there needs to be more say from the individual schools, from the principal, from the communities, of where those cuts would be most beneficial, or where they would be least harm. I shouldn't say beneficial, I say where they'd be the least harmful to each individual school, because it's not like a monolith. It's not like a one size fits all thing. Each individual school has individual needs.
Well, just so you know, I'm reaching out to the superintendent to do a podcast in the same vein and asking her the tough questions that you guys have presented, because nobody gets a pass when we're talking about our children and their futures. They only get one shot. You only get one shot to educate your child. You can't, once your child comes of age, you can't go back. And so it's critically important, especially in the early stages, that you get it worked out. I think, Ms. Henry, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the superintendent currently, as pointed out, is not being honest with the public. You cannot continue to go to the media and say that these cuts are not going to have a direct impact on students. It's not true. What I know is this: the first thing you have to look at are the extra contracts that the district provides for whatever reason to various places. You also have to look at old contracts, but you got to look at new contracts. There have been multiple, I'm sure millions of dollars of contracts that have been pushed through this year. As pointed out, one of them is to her former chief of schools LLC. And I believe that one is close to about $250,000. there are others where we're going to do this study, we're going to do that study. We've had the studies done. Why are we continuously spending money? Why is the superintendent continuously spending money on various contracts, but then still saying that she's going to cut from the workers in our buildings?
Well, as I stated, I am reaching out to the superintendent. I will certainly, ask those questions, but I will inform you guys in the next week or so as we're putting together a community meeting, a substantive community meeting, where we can bring a lot of people out and kind of have this conversation in the public, where people really understand the magnitude of what is transpiring right now inside of Milwaukee Public Schools. And I've talked to some principals. I've got a lot of friends in Milwaukee Public Schools, and I've talked to a lot of principals who really are some good principals, and they've hung around. But right now, certainly, if they're talking about cutting APs in their schools, they're really, and they're eligible to retire. You're going to lose a lot of experience and knowledge as it relates, especially in high schools, rough, tough high schools, that, when this decision is made, you can't go back once you lose that knowledge. And now you're going to cut the support staff. Those things all have to be thought through. And once the decisions are made, you can't go back. So, again, there's so many different aspects to the discussion. I wanted to at least make sure that, people got a chance to hear, at least from those of you who are engaged in this process. So anything else as we get ready to wrap this up?
Well, you mentioned the experience that's going to be lost and the wisdom that's going to be lost. And a further concern that I have about that is what kind of message is that sending to other educators in MPS about the future of their careers. It's teaching them that we don't value, it's teaching them that MPS is not rewarding loyalty. MPS is not valuing experience, and it's not a place to build a future for yourself and grow your career. And we're going to lose good teachers and good administrators to the suburbs. They're going to go to someplace where there's more job stability, maybe. But I think that that's my concern. But I think that loyalty should be rewarded. If someone's been with the district for decades, like the assistant principal at my son's school who got an excess letter, she's been there for decades and she's served the community, and she suddenly just, she was told she could apply for one of the open teaching positions next year, but she would start at experience level 0 as far as pay grade goes. That's an insult to someone that's dedicated their career to MPS. They should be rewarding loyalty and they should be valuing experience.
Ingrid, let me ask you, seniority matter in the district?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But what is being referenced by Nora is something that
I'm not talking about Nora. No, I was
okay.
But go ahead. No, I'm not talking about her situation. I was just asking if people have, if seniority matters inside the district.
It does. What I would wrap up with is the thing that Kristen called on. We're actually calling on the board to schedule a special meeting and to reverse the superintendent's cuts, to maintain or increase hours for critical frontline staff. There needs to be a focus on stabilizing our workforce. And I can only imagine what people, it's not even imagine, I know what people are telling me on the street, which is, I'm looking for something else. I'm looking for something stable. This is not what I've signed up for. And with the teacher shortage and the fact that we still have vacancies in this district, we cannot afford that. So we're just asking for a pause or reversal of the decisions that have been made right now, and to have that time to have a thoughtful plan that is going to centralize budgets, a plan that really and truly does include input from the people on the front line in the schools, from the principals, from the families, from MTEA, from ASC, from PAMS, because right now we haven't had that. And what we have is just resulting chaos and people just being frustrated, upset, and rightfully concerned about, will their school community be able to survive this?
So Dan, Dan, can you, when will this podcast be up on YouTube's, what are the other entities?
Well, as far as video goes, I don't have anything to do with that because I don't have the knowledge of how that all is done. Audio-wise, probably tomorrow at some point.
All right, and so where can they? YouTube? I know certainly YouTube. What else?
I'm not really sure. All I know is I send it to Aaron, and then he kind of distributes it to wherever it needs to go. So that's more of an Aaron question.
Okay, so let me put it this way, Kristen. The audio of this and the video of this, we'll have it figured out in the next day or two, and we'll certainly let you know where you can get access to it. I think it's important that you can have this conversation with others and see kind of exactly, what's transpiring, and that there are people in the media who aren't, on one side of the issue. But I'll certainly let you guys know. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time out. And I'll be in touch, especially with the community meetings shortly.
Great. Thank you, Earl.
Thank all of you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been a while.
All right. Yeah, it won't be that long the next time. That's a wrap for what's going on with Earl Ingram. See you later.
Bye-bye.